Good evening, Tulane parents. Thank you for joining our webinar. I'm Penny Wyatt, the Director of Parent Programs at Tulane in the Division of Student Affairs. Before we kind of get further into this, I just want to ask if you will raise your hand if you can see the screen at this point, just to make sure everything's working. Good. Okay. So I am happy that you've joined us for this very important webinar on sexual assault prevention education and response resources. I'll introduce you to our panelists in just a moment, but before we do that, I would like to just tell you what procedures we use for our webinars. So this is the volume level for the webinar. If you need to adjust that, you can do that on your side. So adjust your controls if you need higher volume. We've found that it works best if we ask everyone to hold your questions until the end. We'll kind of give you a signal to start typing in your questions. Usually we've anticipated most of those questions and in the way we've prepared the presentation, but we'll always spend some time at the end for Q&A. So just type those in at the end. We will read those questions out. They won't be visible to everyone in the webinar, but we'll be able to see those and start answering your questions. If there is a question that we need to research because we don't have that answer tonight, then we'll do that research and find the answer, and I'll email that to everyone afterwards. So the other thing I just want to remind you is that we always post the recordings of the webinar later, a few days after the live webinar, and so there will be a link on the Tulane Parent Programs website, which is parents.tulane.edu, and we'll talk a little bit later about how we're going to make this more widely available too, so some other departments will also have it posted. So tonight, after the webinar closes, I will email all of you, everyone who registered, a copy of a PDF of the slides. So if you wanted to review the information on the slides before you're able to see the combined audio-video file online, you could do that pretty quickly. So I think without further ado, I will introduce our presenters. So we have three people from the Division of Student Affairs here with us tonight. So Matt Hall, who is a health educator for the Center for Wellness and Health Promotion. Julia Broussard, who is the Assistant Director of Case Management and Victim Services. Karen Arndt, who is a psychologist and group counselor at our Counseling and Psychological Services Center. So if you want to contact any of those folks, all of their contact information is included on the very last slide of the presentation. So as we get started here, I just want to turn things over to Julia.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us. Just to really quickly go through what we're hoping to cover this evening, we're hoping to talk with you all about Tulane's policies and procedures for how we respond to reports of sexual violence. We'll be talking with you all about the support services available to students who may be affected by sexual violence. And then hopefully end on a more positive note of what is Tulane doing in the area of prevention and education around this topic, and how can you and your students contribute to a safer community at Tulane. So you can see that's just kind of a rundown of the order we'll be covering those topics. So to get us started, what are our policies and procedures at Tulane? The first thing that's important for everyone to understand is that a lot of our policies stem from federal guidelines and regulations that we have to abide by. So Title IX, most people have heard of this related to athletics. I think in the 90s there was a lot of attention around men's and women's athletics at universities being equitable. But actually what Title IX says is that no person in the United States can be discriminated against on the basis of sex if they are in any kind of program that receives federal assistance. And so Tulane and practically every university receives federal financial assistance in the form of financial aid. And so we are barred from discriminating on the basis of sex. In the 90s and then in 2011, universities got some more specific guidelines from the federal government that sexual harassment, including things like sexual assault and rape, is a form of sex discrimination that's prohibited by Title IX. And so since really 2011, there's been a big increase in regulations and guidance from the federal government. Also some legislation passed with the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act that has really laid out for universities what their responsibilities are when it comes to sexual violence that's affecting their students. So kind of the crux of what these obligations are, if a school knows or reasonably should know about any type of sexual harassment, including sexual violence, schools are required to do three things. They need to take immediate action to eliminate the harassment, they need to work to prevent its reoccurrence, and they need to address the effects of that harassment or violence. And so usually what this looks like is providing resources to any affected students, particularly the victim, to help protect that student and again, hopefully eliminate the harassment, prevent its reoccurrence, address its effects. So this could be things like getting the student connected with resources like therapy or maybe some medical resources. It could also be making adjustments to their class schedule so that they're not coming into contact with the accused student, or maybe taking a lighter course load while they're working to recover from this. The university also has a duty to investigate, and the federal government has been pretty clear that criminal cases don't relieve us of this obligation. So I know sometimes when I see articles about this in the news, I'll see a lot of commenters asking, why are universities handling this? This is a crime and the police should be handling it. But the federal government's made it pretty clear to us that we can't just defer to the criminal justice system. We need to have our own process for addressing these incidents and holding students accountable. Now what that investigation looks like is going to depend on how much information we have, and we do also strongly take the victim's wishes into account, but we do need to look into the report that we've received and look at what steps we can take to try to ameliorate the situation. And finally, we do have a duty to educate and train our campus, and I think towards the end of today's presentation you'll learn more about what we're doing in that area. I do want to note is that one of the requirements we do have is that we have to appoint a Title IX coordinator who kind of oversees our compliance in this area. And so I have the names and contact info of our Title IX coordinators up there. I do want to note that Tulane is actually in the process of searching for and hiring a full-time standalone Title IX coordinator. Our current coordinator, Deborah Love, does a great job. But she also oversees our entire Office of Institutional Equity, which also handles complaints related to things like race discrimination or sexual orientation discrimination and harassment. So the university this year made the decision that that's really a full-time job, being the Title IX coordinator and overseeing these responsibilities. So we are in the process of hiring a full-time coordinator. So the way that we tend to approach incidents when we get a report that one of our students may have been the victim of sexual assault or one of our students may have perpetrated, generally our first step is to get victim support services, my office, involved to reach out to the affected students. But we're then also looping in student conduct and our Office of Institutional Equity, which I'll talk about more in a minute, but they adjudicate these cases. We're also working regularly with TUPD to coordinate with them on cases where the victim may be choosing to also pursue the criminal justice process. And finally, we're consulting with our Office of General Counsel just to ensure that legally we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's, following the regulations. And so this group actually meets on a regular basis to review cases, just make sure we're sharing information, connecting the dots, doing the best we can to support our affected students. At a more macro community level, these offices are also working closely with other departments on campus, like academic affairs and university administrators, to coordinate resources for students. We also do work very closely with parents when the student wants their parents to be involved in the response to that. And then our office is also working to ensure that we have good relationships with New Orleans police, with our district attorney's office. Several members of the university serve on the city's sexual assault response team. We also work really closely with our sexual assault nurse examiners, which is the resource in our community where someone can get a forensic exam or a rape kit. So we really are trying to build a really good web of support and response both on campus and with our off-campus resources. So in terms of a student's options for reporting an incident, they have a few. First and foremost, they can always report any incidents that may violate the law, which would be any incidents of sexual assault, to TUPD and NOPD. They don't have to, we don't require them to report. We do have some statistical information that we have to share with TUPD for crime reporting purposes, but it's always up to the student as to whether or not they'd like to report to the police, and we'll help them through that process. Our Office of Student Conduct will respond to any reports in which the accused student, or in which the accused is a student. And then our Office of Institutional Equity responds to any incidents in which the accused is affiliated with the university in any way. So this could be faculty, staff, student. It could be the person we have a contract with to come drop off our water cooler jugs every week. It could be a construction worker who's working on a building on campus. It could be someone who has a membership to our gym and is just, you know, their only relationship with the university is going to that gym. So really anyone who sets foot on this campus, they're covered by our Office of Institutional Equity. So generally a student's options for reporting is that if the individual has any kind of affiliation with the university, they can report to Office of Institutional Equity and or Student Conduct if the accused is a student. And then for all incidents, regardless of the identity of the perpetrator or the accused, they can report to the police, and we'll help them through those reporting processes. In terms of how Tulane is defining these issues, so we have two policies that generally cover this. The first is our Equal Opportunity Anti-Discrimination Policy, and this is the policy that our Office of Institutional Equity oversees. This is the policy that, like I was saying, applies to anyone who's affiliated with the university in any way, whether they're a student or employee or affiliated by contract. And they very broadly define sexual harassment as any unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature. So this could include things like sexual assault or rape, but it could also include maybe inappropriate comments or gestures, things of that nature. And we do have a link there. When Penny sends out the PowerPoint to everyone, you will be able to access that link and take a look at that policy. For our students, they're also governed by our Code of Conduct. And this is kind of a condensed version of the definitions. If you click on the link for the Code of Conduct, which will be sent out afterwards, you can read the more detailed description. But at its most basic level, we define sexual misconduct as any kind of non-consensual sexual behavior. And then we do break down in the code that that could be a sexual assault in which some type of rape or penetration is occurring, or it could be some other form of sexual contact, such as maybe being groped or something like that. We also have a definition of sexual exploitation, which is a more recent one we added to cover things like a student taking a photograph of someone while they're undressing without that person's consent and then sharing it. Or maybe someone consensually shared a photo of themselves naked with their partner, but now their partner's sharing that without their permission. Those would all be behaviors that would be violations of our Code of Conduct. And I also wanted to discuss with y'all how Tulane defines consent, because I know if you follow this topic in the news, you may have seen a lot about universities updating their definitions of consent. So the way we define it is that it's informed. Both parties understand what they are agreeing to. It's freely and actively given, so the person is not intoxicated or under the influence of alcohol, recreational drugs, prescription drugs, or some kind of combination of those. the person's not under duress or hasn't been threatened with any kind of force. It's using mutually understandable words and actions. And when we talk to our students about this definition of consent, we really encourage them to use words because that can be a lot clearer than actions and gestures and body language. It can also be withdrawn at any time as long as that withdrawal is clearly communicated. So, the expectation is that if someone says stop, the other person is going to stop. And finally, it's ongoing. So it's both ongoing in the moment and within the relationship. So what I say to students is, if you're making out with someone and that's consensual, you still have to get consent in the moment if you want to kick things up a notch and, start undressing or touching that person somewhere. And then the same goes for within that relationship. So if you and your partner have had sex once before, you still have to get consent 2 days later if you want to have sex with them. So this is the definition we're using when we're working with our students. We try to explain it to them in a more engaging way that's hopefully getting them to really reflect on this, and we'll talk later about some of the ways we're doing that. But this is our expectation for students. So shifting gears to survivor services, that was kind of the policy side of things. This is more what is available to a student who has been a victim of sexual assault. Before we go into the resources, I want to clarify the confidentiality levels of our resources. So one thing that the guidance from the federal government has told universities is that we need to be clear in delineating which resources are strictly confidential and which are more of a business confidentiality need-to-know basis. And essentially the guidance we've gotten is that really your strictly confidential resources tend to be those that fall under some type of legal privilege. So things like a doctor or a therapist or a member of the clergy. So most of our resources that we're going to cover fall under this mostly confidential, which is where we're keeping the conversations as confidential as possible. The information's really just being shared with a key group of staff members. And it's being shared with people who can either work to offer resources and accommodations or to ensure the safety of the affected student or of the entire campus. And we really do emphasize to students that even though this information may need to be shared with, for example, if they come in to talk with me, I have to share it with student conduct, their wishes carry a lot of weight in the process. So I don't want them to feel like because they've reported to a mostly confidential resource, suddenly all kinds of things are going to happen against their wishes. But we do have the obligation to share that information. Our resources like our Student Health Center and our Counseling Center, these fall under strictly confidential. And unless the student is posing a threat to themselves or to others or some other limited circumstances, nothing gets shared without that student's permission. So I'm going to shift over to my colleague Matt for a second to talk with you all about what's available at our Student Health Center.
Right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Hall, and I'm a health educator at the Center for Wellness and Health Promotion, which your students probably will come to know as the WELL. And the WELL falls under the umbrella of campus health. And that would include the Center for Wellness and Health Promotion, the Student Health Center, and Counseling and Psychological Services, otherwise known as CAPS. And I'm just going to run through some of the more technical particulars of the Student Health Center before I toss it back to Julia. So typically our hours for operation for the Student Health Center are Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 p.m. and on Saturdays as well. So they do have some weekend access. They also have a 24/7 nurse line that they are able to consult with for sort of typical ailments and illnesses. Survivors who are coming to the Student Health Center, though, who are coming within about 5 days or 120 hours of an assault will have the option for a forensic exam. However, we do not offer forensic exams or SANE exams, or as Julia mentioned, the rape kit at the Student Health Center. Unfortunately, we just don't have the financial flexibility to provide a SANE nurse because they are relatively scarce in the state of Louisiana. However, we can arrange for a TUPD officer or a member of our student affairs on-call team to transport a student to the University Medical Center for a forensic exam. Continuing in that vein, though, the Student Health Center does provide evaluation, testing, treatment, and follow-up care for students at any point after an assault, even if it's after that 120-hour or 5-day window. That would include counseling services and physical health services, including HIV, STI treatments, and prophylaxis for any possible assaults. Okay. At the Student Health Center, we do have physicians, nurse practitioners, and registered nurses available, and they do assist with our screenings, lab testing, support, and things of that nature. And we do work with a student to access community resources as well, particularly if that student is looking for some more long-term care. For example, in our counseling center, we do offer 12 sessions, and Karen will talk about this a little bit later on. But if they need to continue some counseling after those 12 sessions expire, we do work diligently with the student to find resources within the community. All right. And we have a really great relationship at the Student Health Center and with Campus Health altogether with our victim support services. So we are referring students to Julia's office victim support services should they like to seek that opportunity. And as Julia mentioned, the Student Health Center is strictly confidential, so no information is going to be shared unless the student poses a risk to themselves or others. And then here is the contact information for the Student Health Center, and they can be contacted at that phone number. All right, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and toss it off to Karen.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Karen Arndt and I'm a psychologist working at the Counseling Center, which we refer to as CAPS. Let's see here. So we offer a number of services to students in general, but a specific service that we offer to survivors of sexual assault, and this would be female-only survivors of sexual assault at this time. We understand that there are, of course, male survivors of sexual assault, but given our limited resources at this time, we offer a group for females, and we can certainly provide a group for male students if there are enough interested students. Our group is called Break the Silence, a survivor support group. And this is for female students, and this can be undergraduate students, graduate students who have experienced a sexual assault or sexual violence, you know, at some time in the past few years, basically not necessarily childhood molestation, but more so, you know, have experienced an assault more recently. We offer a number of services for students at the Counseling Center. We offer walk-in services, so our hours are 8:30 to 5 o'clock Monday through Friday. We're not open on Saturdays like the Student Health Center is, but we are open Monday through Friday, and at any time that we're open, a student can walk in. Any student in crisis or who wants to meet with a counselor immediately can walk in, and they may have to wait just a little bit, but we always have a clinician who's the walk-in counselor that they can meet with then and there. We also offer individual therapy is the biggest, the most common service that we offer. And students, and this includes undergraduates and graduate students, can see a counselor for up to 12 sessions per academic year. And if they do utilize that resource and they still, and it seems like counseling is helpful for them, we work really hard with them to make sure that they're set up with services off campus. We have someone whose exclusive role is, we call her the care coordinator. Her name is Paige, and her exclusive role is to help students get set up with off-campus services. We also offer psychiatric services. So we have a few psychiatrists on staff who perform, medication evaluations, and students are able to receive both the talk therapy end of things and also the medication end of things through our center. And I mentioned the community referrals and the consultations that's listed up there. That really just means either walk-in, like I mentioned before, students can walk in and utilize our services, or they can make an appointment for an initial consultation. And that's a 30-minute meeting with a therapist, and from there we decide kind of where to go, whether it's to receive an off-campus referral or to see a therapist in-house. Again, as Julia mentioned, we're strictly confidential at the counseling center, so a student can come to us and be assured that anything they share with us will not be shared, except under very rare circumstances that really have to do with harm to self. So usually it's suicidality or harm to another person. So yeah, we're here, and let's see, what else do we have here? Strictly confidential, and we can be contacted at that number. And we also have something that's new called The Line, and the number that's listed there will put a student through to it's through the Baton Rouge Counseling Center, which is obviously located in Baton Rouge, but we've become associated with them. They have a line that's exclusive to Tulane students, and even though they're located in Baton Rouge, they're able to call up information that's local. So if a student is in crisis and needs resources in the New Orleans area, they have a list of that, and they know kind of where to direct students. But basically it's a 24/7 number that students can call if they're in crisis or they just want to talk to somebody. And it's a really great resource. So, great, thank you.
Great, this is Julia again. So to kind of wrap up survivor services, I'll tell you about some things that fall under my office's area. So my office is case management and victim support services, and our role is really to make sure that we're maintaining a really good network of support services for survivors on campus, and develop those relationships with off-campus resources in order to ensure that we can get students to those services when they need them. My office actually serves a variety of victims, so sexual assault, stalking, dating violence, those are definitely one of our biggest areas, but also students who may be victims of physical assault, robbery, burglary, theft, hazing, anything of that nature. And we play a big role in assisting our university in complying with Title IX and these other policies and regulations I was telling you about earlier. We also work with staff in our office, work with staff in housing and residence life to provide 24-hour on-call coverage for the campus. So whereas the line that Karen was telling you about is, really a place for students to call when they're feeling in crisis and need to talk to someone and maybe don't know where to turn, our on-call staff can kind of help students with any kind of immediate resources that they need. So Matt, for example, mentioned earlier that students can get help getting to the hospital for a forensic exam. Our on-call staff could drive them to the hospital or stay there with them while they're getting their exam done, just to provide some support. Or if a student lived in the same residence hall as the student who had assaulted them, we could put them in emergency housing for the evening so that they were not staying in that same residence hall. So any kind of immediate support or assistance that a student needs related to victimization, they can contact that number and get connected with a staff member who can provide that assistance that evening or weekend or whenever it is they're calling. In terms of some of the resources available to victims of sexual assault, one is definitely housing accommodations. So as I mentioned, if they need emergency housing or just want to move to a different residence hall because maybe they live in the same residence hall as their perpetrator, or they were assaulted in their room and just don't feel comfortable being in that room anymore, we'll work with housing to make that happen. We can also work with the student on academic accommodations. So if they maybe need to drop a class or two, even if we're all the way in November, we can do that, if they're finding that dealing with the assault or the trauma that happened is just really making it too hard for them to be able to take a full course load. We can also just work with professors if they need maybe an extension on a paper or a test because of the effects of the trauma. As Matt and Karen were mentioning, our office works really closely with campus health. So our office works to make sure students are getting connected with medical and counseling, and vice versa. Those offices also refer students to us. We will also help a student through the criminal legal process. So we'll talk with them about their options for reporting to the police. And then if they do decide to do that, sit with them while they're being interviewed by the police, go with them to meetings with the district attorney's office, accompany the student to court if the case gets to that point. We'll also serve in a similar advocacy role for students who are interested in utilizing one of the university's adjudication processes. So either through student conduct for cases where the perpetrator is a student, or Office of Institutional Equity when the perpetrator is faculty, staff, or some kind of other affiliate. So again, we'll sit with the student while they're being interviewed by the investigator, attend their conduct or hearing with them, just to be a general support through that process. Our office can also issue no contact orders between Tulane students. So I tend to refer to this as the Tulane version of a restraining order. It's a document the university can issue between two students, barring them from having contact with one another. So that can add another layer of protection for a victim, particularly while their conduct case is pending. And as I mentioned earlier, we are a mostly confidential resource. So if a student comes forward to us, I would be obligated to share that information with our Title IX coordinator, Office of Institutional Equity, Student Conduct, to keep them in the loop. One great resource that I also want to highlight is we have a student organization, SAFE, that stands for Sexual Aggression Peer Hotline and Education. They are trained and advised by my office, and during the fall and spring semesters, they run a 24/7 peer-run hotline for students affected by sexual assault, relationship abuse, stalking, and sexual harassment. And they are a strictly confidential resource. So kind of similar to the line that Karen was telling you about, this is somewhere where a student can call for just some support and basic resource information. Sometimes students find it helpful to be able to talk to a peer. Now, this is someone who has gone through 40 hours of training to be able to work on the hotline, but it's one of their fellow Tulane students. And so I think the students really appreciate having that resource. One last resource with my office that I want to highlight is our online concern form. So if you go to tulane.edu/concerns, and there'll be a hyperlink on the PowerPoint that you can access, you get taken to this form that I've screenshotted. And this can be used to really report any concerns. So certainly it could be used for something like reporting a sexual assault. And it can be as detailed or as little info as you want. So sometimes we get very detailed ones that people send in, you know, with a lot of details and names about the incident. Sometimes it's just a general, you know, I heard that a student on the 3rd floor of Monroe had da-da-da-da-da happen to them. Now sometimes the more limited information affects our ability to follow up on it, but really we want this to be something that people can use to report anything, and they can share as much or as little information as they are comfortable sharing. There is the option of putting a name and contact info. That can be really helpful for our office to follow up with the reporting in person to maybe get more information, but if someone doesn't feel comfortable including that, they can file it anonymously and we'll still follow up on it. So I encourage you as parents to use that if you ever have any concerns, but also please encourage your students to use it. They can also use it to let us know if maybe their roommate is experiencing some kind of struggle and needs some support. And so it's kind of a final piece on support services. Just wanted to provide a few tips for how you as a parent could respond if you ever got a disclosure that your student may have been sexually assaulted. You know, I hope none of you ever find yourselves in that position, but as someone who works with our students who are survivors of sexual assault, I can tell you that a lot of them do end up telling their parents, and it makes such a huge difference for them when their parents are supportive and don't say things that cause the student to feel blamed, that just let the student know that they're there for them and they love them and care about them. So some things that are good to say, you know, letting your student know that you believe them. So many survivors struggle with worrying about whether or not people are going to believe them or going to blame them. So emphasizing that your student was not at fault, even if they were underage and drinking, or they met someone on Tinder, and in your mind you're like, why are you meeting strange people through anonymous apps or whatever it is? Not expressing that and letting the student know that whatever they did, it didn't give someone the right to rape them or sexually assault them. And thanking your student for telling them. That takes an incredible amount of courage and strength to be able to tell your parent something that is just gonna make your parent feel awful and cause them a lot of pain. And so really letting them know that you're glad that they felt comfortable sharing that with you and that you love them and are there to support them. Karen or Matt, did y'all chime in anything there?
I think that's great advice. I think just generally communicating to them the message that you are there, you're here to listen. You'll get to this later, but you're not there to interrogate them. But people who've been assaulted often are traumatized and confused and numb, and just to know that they have a safe place that they can go to, where someone's there and they're listening and they're just present. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and some tips for things that sometimes we have a tendency to say but aren't the most helpful. One is saying everything will be okay. And I know as a parent especially, that can be a really natural response to want to say everything will be fine, I'm here. But in reality, we can never promise that. But what we can promise is I'm here for you, I love you, I'm going to do everything I can to support you through this and to help you get through it. And then really avoiding any kind of questions or statements that could come across as blaming, because survivors do really struggle with a lot of self-blame. So, telling your student you shouldn't have been out drinking or something like that is not the best, it's not the time to talk about that with them. And similarly, asking them questions about, well, why didn't you, call the police, or why did your friends leave you, or things like that, can also heighten that blame. And as Karen mentioned, avoiding interrogating them. One of the things that's difficult for students who do choose to report is that they often end up having to tell that story over and over again, and they can really re-experience that trauma every time they have to tell it. So, letting them know that you're here to listen to as much as they want to tell you, but not interrogating them and asking them for every little detail of what happened, because those can be really difficult details for them to have to recount. Anything else y'all want to share? Or? Okay.
Oh, that sounds good.
All right. And I do want to emphasize that, we are here as a resource for parents too. So as I mentioned, my office will definitely work with parents if the student is comfortable with me speaking with them. And I'm here to support y'all too if you ever find yourselves in this position, but I hope you don't. So I am now going to turn things back over to Matt to talk with you all about some of the things we're doing to hopefully educate our students and prevent this type of stuff from ever even happening.
All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, I am from the WELL, which falls under the Campus Health umbrella. If you've had to do any, uploading of forms for immunizations, for example, you've probably seen the Campus Health website. But we have a hyperlink that will take you directly to the WELL in this PowerPoint that Penny will send out later on. If you want to explore that later on tonight, though, I would encourage you to do so. It's wavehealth.tulane.edu, and you can explore information about the WELL, but also counseling and psychological services and the Student Health Center. And one note about the upcoming things that I'm going to discuss. I'm going to talk about some programming and prevention and education efforts done by the WELL. And at first, they're probably going to seem not directly related to sexual assault. But I think what you'll find is that the services that we provide are done so because students don't, attend Tulane and seek services in a vacuum. So while I might talk about an alcohol program, I think it's important to note that alcohol and sexual assault, or mental health and sexual assault, are not, unique and separate from each other. And so we're going to have a conversation about overall wellness, and we have to keep in mind that all of these elements of wellness are interchangeable and vary student by student. All right, so our first program, and this is one of our most visible programs that has stakeholders across the campus, is called OneWave, and it's our bystander intervention program. And basically, we're seeking community mobilization for this program, and it's designed to reduce and ultimately eliminate sexual violence on our campus and within the Tulane community in a broader sense. I'm not going to say too much about this now because I have a bit more information on it later on. But once again, this is basically empowering students to feel comfortable intervening in situations of possible harm among their friends, peers, or people they see in their daily lives. My Student Body is a pre-matriculation program that's online. Incoming students, be they new first-year students or transfer students, are required to do this program. It takes them about 3 hours, and it does do education on alcohol use and drug use, but also sexual assault and the interplay between each of these. And it's, as I mentioned, an online prevention program, and it uses science-based research to educate and engage students. And it doesn't aim students not to do one thing or the other, but basically to make decisions for themselves that would help deal with their own behaviors and those of their peers so that they might avoid consequences down the line, or if not that, certainly make healthier decisions in the moment. Cognito is another online module that our students are going through, particularly our first year students and our incoming transfer students. And this is actually a suicide gatekeeper training. And there are versions for both students and faculty and staff. And what I think is important to note about Cognito is that it's really important to educate ourselves, not only as parents or as staff, but also as students, about individuals or students in distress. So the Cognito training empowers students to recognize signs of distress so that they can step in again and point a friend or a peer in the direction of help. All right. The Tulane University Peer Health Educators, or otherwise known as the TUFs, are a group of students. We currently have about 45 students on campus that are TUFs, and they are a group of trained and certified peer health educators that advocate for and promote healthy choices and personal well-being and community safety. They use quality, innovative, and inclusive workshops, services, and events to meet the needs of all of Tulane students. And so if we're thinking about this in a broader context, I think we want to turn our conversation about wellness to one of holistic health and out of this traditional disease model. So whereas we used to consider wellness to be the absence of illness, we're now thinking about the overall mind, body, spirit wellness. And the TUFs create a culture in which it's normal to discuss one's wellness needs and proactively reach out to find necessary resources. And on top of that, they're modeling the positive wellness behaviors that we like to see in our Tulane students, which would include positive bystander intervention, good drinking habits, and things of that nature that could contribute to a culture of violence possibly. Living Well at Tulane is a program for incoming first-year students that they all go through the Sunday prior to the classes starting. Myself and I believe Julia, were you on that too, Karen?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so all of us here today were facilitators for that program, but basically it is a program that covers alcohol use and bystander intervention, more on a basic level, essentially, providing basic bystander intervention skills for first-year students and giving them a bit of alcohol education content before starting their time at Tulane. Ooh, did we skip a slide? Oh. All right, BASICS is the Brief Alcohol Screening and Intervention for college students. And this is a program that is set up through the Well to do some education after a possible incident, for example, with conduct or housing and residence life, or even a self-referral. So if a student is written up, for example, in the residence hall, they might be referred to the Well to go through a BASICS session in which they will sit down with a health educator like myself. And it's a 2-session program. In the first session, they'll undergo a personalized analysis. They'll take basically a survey about their drinking and drug use habits. And in the second session, the health educator will review that analysis with the student and have an in-depth conversation about, health behaviors and how the interplay of these two things may result in, academic success, personal success, or not, and how one might be able to improve these behaviors to continue leading a successful life at Tulane. Within this context, students may be in a situation where they disclose sexual assault or victimization, and they are protected by confidentiality in this instance. Typically, the well doesn't have the same level of confidentiality as, a licensed professional, but within the basics realm, they would. But in that case, we would be able to play that role of advocate and get them pointed in the right direction, getting them to the Student Health Center or referring them to Julia. But otherwise, it's designed to assist students in examining their drinking habits in a judgment-free and, non-labeling environment that is private and is, not referred back to their housing staff. Just a few other background details on Basics. It is free. If a student is referred to Basics at the well, it is free for their first session. Any repeat sessions may incur a cost of $200. All right, and then I'll toss it back to Julia real quick for one final note.
So Matt's office definitely is kind of our key office on campus for our health promotion and prevention efforts, but there are a few programs that my office oversees as well. So one of these is the Clothesline Project, which is a project that our student organization, SAFE, takes on every year. And this is really to support survivors and raise awareness for sexual violence, dating violence, stalking. So what it is the SAFE members have students decorate t-shirts with messages around these issues, and sometimes it's maybe someone, an ally or a friend decorating a shirt that says you're not alone. Sometimes it's a survivor decorating a shirt and saying things like, my rapist, I'm stronger than my rapist, or something like that. So a really powerful awareness event, and then those shirts are hung throughout campus for a week, usually during April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Matt talked with you all about some of the education that our incoming students get. Another program is Sex Signals. So during move-in weekend, they normally attend the Living Well program that Matt talked about, and then rotate between that and Sex Signals, which is an interactive theater performance that talks with students about sexual assault, really educates them on the definition of consent, and also talks with them about our societal expectations around gender and sexuality and how those can be harmful and create a culture that supports violence. And so it talks with students about how they can fight against that culture that might be supporting violence on our campus. And then I talked with you all about SAFE earlier. We talked about kind of the H in their name, the hotline, but they do also do a lot of efforts around the E in their name, the education. Over the past couple years, they have really expanded their programming and now offer 1 hour, 30-minute programs on consent and how to support survivors that are available to student groups. So a fraternity can request it, a RA can request it for their building. They've also engaged in legislation advocacy and other efforts around the topic of sexual violence. And I will toss it back to Matt now.
From the conversation we've been having so far, it may sound like, Julia's office or campus health are the only folks that are doing violence prevention work or advocacy work, depending on the situation. But I think it's important to note that there is, a behind-the-scenes campus-wide prevention effort going on. And so we want to talk about the Sexual Violence Prevention and Education Coalition. This was founded in January of 2014 with a directive from our administration, and it's put together a collaborative and strategic group, interdisciplinary group, that are seeking to foster, sexual climates and cultures where we feel safe and informed and well positioned to thrive. We're also aiming to enhance the effectiveness of communication between different groups on campus that are doing violence prevention work or initiatives related to Title IX, for example. And so it's important to note that, myself, the individuals from the Well and Campus Health and CAPS and Julia's office are on this, but we also have members of, diverse faculty and staff and undergraduate and graduate students, including, individuals from athletics who are present and invested in this work. And so I'll run through some of the items that we are, working on for the upcoming semester and into the spring, just to give you a sense of what that looks like. An event that we held right at the beginning of the school year on August 31st was called Shifting the Paradigm. And I would invite you to check out the link, stp.tulane.edu. It highlights the event itself and the scope of that event. But this was designed to share and be transparent about the climate of sexual assault at Tulane. So we had representatives from case management and victim support services and campus health and Office of Equal Opportunity sharing their statistics, essentially, how many students have been impacted in one way or another by sexual violence, and what is the incidence rate of sexual violence on the college campus. This was data collected through our pilot study for campus sexual assault climate study during the 2014-2015 school year. And then this was followed by a panel of individuals from the SVPEC who were answering audience questions throughout the evening. And it was a really great success and a testimony to the investment that our students have in this issue as well. The event was attended on the first Monday of classes by 325 students, which says a lot about their belief in the importance of this event, and was also opened by the president of the university and closed by our Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Dusty Porter. Again, I would invite you to go ahead and check out that website, and I'll reference it a couple other times throughout the rest of the presentation. October is traditionally Dating or Domestic Violence Month nationally. We are recognizing this as Violence Awareness Month. I think a lot of our students fall in that traditional 18 to 24 college age range where they may not be in a domestic situation. So taking in mind, their version of relationships and bringing awareness to them. One of the subcommittees within the SVPEC is our campus-wide programming subcommittee, and this is generating communication about all of the events that are happening in October. And so the campus will see some communication blasts in the coming weeks that provide, an executive summary of every event happening on campus or in the community across populations dealing with relationship violence in the month of October. Take Back the Night is also on that communication that we'll be sending out for October, but we want to put this on your radars as parents, and I might bring Julia into this a little bit, but that'll take place on Thursday, October the 29th, starting at the Loyola Horseshoe. It'll march, the Take Back the Night march will bring students, faculty, and staff back to campus, where they'll end up in the Qatar Ballroom of the Lavin Burnick Center. Julia, do you want to add anything about that?
I would just highlight that Take Back the Night is an event that's actually a joint event between several area universities. So while Shifting the Paradigm, Relationship Violence Awareness Month are Tulane-specific events that we're talking about, Take Back the Night is a joint effort between Tulane, Loyola, University of New Orleans, Dillard University, and Xavier University. So it's really bringing together the entire New Orleans community, but particularly our university students, to say we support survivors and we fight for the end of violence on our campuses. It's a really powerful event.
All right. And then for reference in the spring, very similar to October, we're going to be sending out a centralized communication about the events pertaining to Sexual Assault Prevention Awareness Month. And I think one of the really wonderful elements of these particular communication blast is that it emphasizes programming that is being put on by students. And so their peers can see that students are taking the charge on programming to recognize this important issue. Okay, turning to our alcohol policy, I'm sure you probably know, but I'd love to remind you that we have a new alcohol policy at Tulane, and you can check that out at the link there, thealcohol.tulane.edu. And I bring this up because alcohol does represent the most common date rape drug, used particularly among college students. And so I want to empower parents, particularly, and families to recognize that prevention and support services are engaging students in a survivor-focused and empathetic fashion, particularly around alcohol, maintaining an atmosphere where it's never a survivor's fault. But we would encourage parents, like Julia mentioned earlier, to engage in conversations that are empathetic in that same way. And so to provide a bit of education, if you check out that website, there is the Parent Alcohol Handbook. And this provides some conversation starters for you and your student about alcohol so that you have that open and honest communication at all times. All right, and I'm going to toss it over to Julia again.
So we also wanted to tell you a little bit about what one of our wonderful partners and allies on this campus, the Newcomb College Institute, is doing. So their focus is on women's leadership, but they have really done a lot of great programming, bringing in experts on this topic, hosting book groups, reading books around the issue of sexual assault. They've really been a great partner in this. They also advise some student organizations, the Vagina Monologues and 1 Billion Rising, which also do a lot of great work around sexual assault awareness and advocacy. They have also partnered with the SVPEC to help produce a list of courses available through different departments at the university that have some kind of focus on violence or sexual assault, and a list of faculty members who do research around this issue, so that if students are interested in engaging with this on a more academic level, that is available to them. And so they have been a great partner in that with us. I also did want to highlight that my office partners with Student Conduct and with our Office of Institutional Equity, as well as, I actually apologize, I left off our Professor Dennis Kehoe, who is chairing the Faculty Senate Committee for Equal Opportunity, has also been a great partner in this, in making sure that we're training our faculty and staff and other first responders, people who are likely to receive reports of sexual violence, about, one, how to respond sensitively and appropriately, but then two, what are our policies and procedures so that they can effectively help someone. So this includes, we've been making the rounds to faculty departments, talking to our faculty about what they can do if a student discloses. We do regular training for our campus police, for our resident assistants in the residence hall, so really trying to catch all of the people that could be likely to receive a report. And I'll send it back to Matt.
One of the other initiatives that the Sexual Violence Prevention and Education Coalition has been working on finalizing over the summer and into the lead up of shifting the paradigm was an intervention inventory. And so this is publicly available at stp.tulane.edu, and it provides information and contact info about all of the intervention programming and education that we do on campus across the Division of Student Affairs and within our campus partners. And so that is listed online, and I would encourage you to check that out. And please let us know if you have any questions about that in the future. All right, so moving into this idea of contributing to a safer community of care and concern, this is where I'm going to really challenge parents to get involved and keep those lines of communication open with their students. As I mentioned earlier, we have a program at Tulane called One Wave, and it's our bystander intervention and community mobilization program. So the trainings themselves, we hold 4 trainings per semester. They're about 4 hours in length, and we take students across across campus into these trainings and work with them on a couple of different levels. We're looking to recognize the scope of, of the problem itself. So what is the scope of sexual violence, within Tulane, within New Orleans, as a nation, and using this as our frame, we're going to look towards identifying situations where there might be high-risk behavior, so recognizing a situation where there's possible violence, and then providing students the skills and the confidence to step into those situations in one way or another so that they can reduce or stop that violence, deflect, essentially, creating that safer moment, or what we call a green dot. A moment of harm is a red dot, a moment of safety is a green dot. I won't get into all of the lingo, but basically the skills to recognize the difference, and then also implementing some proactive behaviors where students are able to show their peers that they are intolerant to violence within their sphere of influence and in their campus community. And all of this is done with the purpose of creating culture change on campus. Because we've looked at this 1 in 4, 1 in 5 number, or 1 in 10 number for men for about 30 years now, since the Mary Koss study came out in 1984. And we had to change the way we were approaching sexual violence work. And so instead of teaching someone how to not be assaulted or someone how to not assault, we're empowering all the people that they come into contact with to feel as though that they can step in and create change themselves. And we're seeing this, within these student trainings, which is great. And I guess I should mention as well, all of our resident assistants on campus, all of the RAs, all of our athletes, and a growing number of campus student leaders who are devoted to this cause have been trained. So it's a growing movement on campus, and we're also seeing it filter into the classroom. Recently, starting this semester, we have faculty including One Wave language about seeking resources and an intolerance to violence in their syllabus, in their class syllabus. We also have published a faculty toolkit that provides faculty, resources and language about how to approach, working with a student who might be victimized. And then finally, we've also published a curriculum infusion document so that faculty who are looking to become engaged in an academic sense can weave this content into their normal lectures. All right, so this is the part where I'm going to call parents out and get them involved. Parents are our most valuable allies in this work to end sexual violence, and so I think that you all are positioned to make a huge change in your student's life. So I think it's definitely important to have a conversation with your student about involvement on campus. What can your student do, or what does your student feel comfortable doing to put him or herself or their self out there in a way that illustrates their intolerance to violence and their willingness to help? I would also say it's important to be prepared. Your student or a friend of your student may be the survivor of sexual assault, and certainly we hope that is never the case, but I think having all the tools in your belt that you can possibly have is certainly important. So we would invite you to visit the alcohol website, alcohol.tulane.edu, and explore resources on campus about alcohol, and then visit the One Wave website, onewave.tulane.edu, and become informed about bystander intervention and the One Wave movement. All right, so at this portion, we're going to go ahead and work into the questions. Penny is going to moderate the questions for us, and we'll just sort of popcorn style answer those, but feel free to go ahead and start typing those.
Okay, we'll get started here with some questions. So one person has asked, where can I find the resource on how to speak to our student about sexual assault? So could you remind us where that would be? A resource on how to speak to our student about sexual assault.
Sure. So I don't think we actually have a parent guide created on how to speak to your student about sexual assault. And that's definitely something we can work on getting created. I think actually the faculty guide on how to talk to a student about sexual assault, so that one that Matt referenced that is going to be on the onewave.tulane.edu website. Those tips, I mean, we put them on there for faculty, but they're really the same tips we give to anyone. So it's about being supportive, not interrogating or trying to tell the person what they should or should not do, but really just letting them know that you're there as a support and then making sure they're aware of what resources are available on campus. But I do think that that's a great idea for us to maybe create a little 2-page guide for parents on tips for responding if your student does disclose a sexual assault. We're happy to work on that.
You can also, this is Karen from the Counseling Center. Our walk-in clinician who's there 8:30 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday also takes calls from parents who have a specific question about how they should approach their student, about any number of things. But if you find yourself just kind of confused about how to go about it, we always have an on-call clinician. They may not be able to speak to you in the moment, but they will call you back that same day and be able to kind of talk you through what might be an appropriate response and a helpful response.
Another thing that we wanted to just encourage you to do is just in general to get more education about the resources here at Tulane. We recommend that you encourage your student to watch this webinar. This information is the kind of thing we present to students all the time, but they may not have been able to go to a particular presentation, or they haven't heard all of this information in one place, kind of gathered in this format. So when we do convert the webinar and have a recording of it, it'll be linked from the parent website, but it'll also be linked from the Student Health Center website. So we'll even include where else it's linked or something when it's on our parent page, just so that if you wanted to have a discussion with your student about it and make sure that they've already reviewed the information so you're both on the same page, you can do that. So let's see if there's any other questions. I'm not seeing other questions, so I'll ask again. If you've got a question, then type that in. And it's Wednesday night, so you'll probably see the combined audio video file link up by Monday. So I would say if you want to review everything again or share that with someone, then it should be available on Monday. And when I send you the follow-up email with the PDF attached, I'll remind you of the web page where you'll find the webinar archive. So I don't see any other questions. If I've somehow missed a question, you are welcome to email me. I think I have a question. Okay, here's one. So when collecting a rape kit, time is of the essence. If an incident occurs on a weekend when health services are unavailable, what is the approach for handling this? So Julia?
Sure, yeah. So the student has a few different options. So the hospital in New Orleans, University Medical Center, that is our hospital that has sexual assault nurse examiners on call 24/7. They do our forensic exams. They are fabulous at what they do. They're available 24/7, so really it would just be a question of, what is the student's best option for getting to that hospital. They can contact TUPD, and TUPD can take them to the hospital. They can take them in an unmarked car, so they don't have to go sirens blaring or anything like that. They can also reach out to the on-call staff member for student affairs at 504-920-9900, and that number is in the slides. And that staff member can pick up the student and take them in their personal vehicle. If the student feels comfortable, they can also take a cab or have a friend drive them or take their own vehicle, kind of whatever feels best for them. But there's definitely Tulane resources that can help the student access that.
very helpful, supportive, warm, and encouraging resources like Julia and
Yes, I could
other.
be one of the people.
She could be one of those
driving
people
your
that's
student to the
helping in that
hospital.
situation. But we also have several other people who serve in that capacity that know how they need to approach that to help the students feel less stressed and more comfortable, since it's a stressful kind of situation.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize, like, the student doesn't need to file a full report or anything. They can just say, you know, I'm so-and-so, I need a ride to the hospital for a forensic exam or a rape kit, and we're not going to interrogate them or ask them details of the assault if they don't want to share that.
Okay, I think that was our last question, so I'll just offer one more time. If you have a question to type in, please go ahead and do that now. And if you you reflect on all of this and you have a question later, then please just email one of the presenters. Their contact information is on the final slide, or you can always send that question to me and I'll forward it on to the appropriate staff person at Tulane. So if I'm not sure of the answer, we're going to put our heads together and make sure you get an answer from the person most able to help you. I will also just say this is the first time we've done this particular topic for a webinar. So I would welcome your feedback about the presentation, the format, the amount of information and the different components. And so please let us know if you have any suggestions for improvement, or if there are particular things that you found especially helpful, or some things you weren't expecting to hear about that you're glad to know about that are happening here at Tulane. So we want parents to feel reassured that we have a lot of resources here to help your student. We only want them to be safe and healthy and happy and successful here on campus. So that's what we're all working towards. So we want you to feel like that's going to happen and that you can rely on that. So we want to keep you informed about what kinds of things are offered for your student. And we always appreciate hearing your feedback about those things. So thank you for joining us tonight. And later this evening, I'll send you the PDF of the webinar slides. And you can look on our website for other webinars coming up. I'll send you the link to the schedule as well. So thank you so much.